student, this is Pallav Darbari, your host, and you are watching Pallav Darbari classes. In this video, we will discuss Macroeconomics Class 12, and the name of the chapter is National Income Accounting. This is my 17th video on the topic National Income Accounting. In this video, I will discuss the items to be considered while calculating national income. This topic is very important, and 3 marks question, 4 marks question, and even 6 marks question can be asked from this particular topic. Firstly, we will discuss the items that should be considered, and later on the basis of last year questions, we will check how much we have grasped the thing. Without wasting the time period, let us start the class. Let me open up the screen. Dear students, we know that we are having 3 methods to calculate the national income. First one is value added method. Second one is income method. And the last one is expenditure method. So how many methods do we have to calculate national income? We are having 3 methods to calculate national income. So let us see the item that we should consider while calculating the national income. We should consider the final sale proceeds that we have to consider, number 1, on the basis of the value added method. On the basis of the income method, we should consider what? We should consider the compensation of employees. Compensation of employees. Under the compensation of employees, employers' contribution. Allowances. Salary, wages. Perks or perquisites. Then we should consider operating surplus. This is a very important thing is there. We consider the profit. We will not consider the item which comes under the profit. It means we only consider the total profit. We will not consider the dividend. We will not consider the corporate tax. We will not consider the undistributed profit. Clear? We always consider the profit. Then we will consider the mixed income of self-employed. It means that the fees which the professionals are charging for rendering the professional services, that we also consider. Mixed income of self-employed. From the expenditure method, only 2 items we consider. Firstly, we consider the final consumption expenditure. Final consumption expenditure. Final consumption expenditure, it means that the final consumption expenditure of the government and the final consumption expenditure of the household. When I say final consumption expenditure of the government, what it means? It means that if the government is giving the electricity facilities to the people free, if the government is distributing food item to the population, it comes under the final consumption expenditure of the government. Clear? And when I say final consumption expenditure of the individual, what it means? It means that the individuals are purchasing food items, individuals are purchasing the fare ticket. I mean, these are the items which comes under the final consumption expenditure. And the second is investment. Second one is investment, or we can say that it is the capital formation. Under the investment, infrastructure, Infrastructure comes, it means that the government is incurring the investment on the infrastructure development. So the infrastructure comes, expenditure made by the government on infrastructure will be considered in the national income. Second is purchase of machineries should be considered, because this is the investment made by the firm. From the household, we can say that investment on land, investment on house, it will be the investment or the capital formation made by the household. So I've written house or investment on land. I hope these points are clear. So on the basis of the different methods of calculating national income, we have seen that the final sale proceeds should be considered, compensation of employees should be considered, operating surplus should be considered, mixed income of self-employed to be considered, final consumption expenditure should be considered, and investment should be considered. Clear? These are the items which should be considered. When I say compensation of the employees, always remember we consider the factor payment. Factor payment made by the firm to the household. It should be considered. Clear? And we always consider the earned income. Clear? We consider what type of the income we consider? We consider earned income. I hope the point is clear. Now let us discuss one by one the items that should be considered. Then we will discuss the items that should not be considered. Firstly, let us see the items which should not be considered, which should be excluded while calculating the national income. The first one is, as I told you, the transfer payment should not be considered while calculating the national income. What should not be considered? The transfer income should not be considered while calculating the national income. The question is why the transfer payment should not be considered while calculating the national income? And the reason is because it is the unearned income. We always consider that part of the income which is earned by the factors of production. We never consider the income which is unearned. Clear? That is the main reason the transfer payment should not be considered. We consider that type of the income which is of a bilateral in nature. We consider the income which is not unilateral in nature. When I say unilateral, it means one-sided transaction. Clear? Let us see the thing which comes under the parameter of the transfer payment. First is financial help given to the war victims. Always remember the financial help given to the war victims is not considered. Why? Because this is the money which is being given to the war victim without rendering any service. So it is a transfer payment and nothing else. It is a unearned income. It is what? It is a earned income. The second is money received by the individual by relatively working abroad. Always remember the money received by an individual from a relative. For example, you are living in abroad and you are sending your money to the relative living in India. Your parents, I mean, whatever the money you are sending to your parents will not be considered as the income of your parent. It is your income, not the income of your parent. It is called remittances. So the remittance will not be considered while calculating the national income. Why? Because it is earned income of your parents. Second is old age pension granted to the senior citizens. I mean the pension which the senior citizens are getting right now, it is the unearned income. They have not earned it. They are right now, they are not rendering any services. They rendered the service in the past and they are getting the money right now. So this is the unearned income. So it will not be considered while calculating the national income. It is nothing but a transfer payment only. Next is scholarship paid by the government to or any other institutions. We have seen that the government is giving the scholarship to the deserving candidates, and some of the institutes are also giving the scholarship to the students. But always remember it is not the earned income. They have not given any factor services. The next is gift or the donation given by the NGOs or the other non-profit organization. It is also unearned income and it is nothing but a transfer of payment. This is the money which is being given to the NGOs. Why? So that the NGO can carry out their activities, carry out the charitable work without interruption, without pause. Clear? So the NGO have not earned it. Next is the expenditure on children's marriage by a parent. We have seen that in India, huge money is being spent or large money is being spent by the parents on the marriages. that is also not considered at the time of calculating the national income. Why? Because it is the transfer payment only. The children has not earned that money. Pocket money, very common. For example, we have seen that when we were a small kids, our parents used to give the pocket money. Have we earned it? Answer is no, we have not earned it. So it is nothing but a transfer payment only. So the pocket money which the students, which the wards are getting from the parents is also not to be considered while calculating national income, because it is nothing but a transfer payment only. When I say transfer payment, always remember transfer payment means one-sided payment. The money which we get without rendering any service is called transfer payment and should not be considered while calculating national income. I hope the point is clear. The second type of the transaction that should not be considered while calculating the national income is the activities meant for self-consumption. Always remember the activities meant for self-consumption, that is called leisure activities. The leisure activities will not be considered. The question is why the leisure activities or the activities for the self-consumption should not be considered. There are two reasons. Reason number one is these activities being given or is being carried out not to earn the money. First motive. Second is it is very difficult to value the leisure activities. Since we can't value the leisure activities, second is these type of the activities rendered not to earn any money. Because of these two objectives, the leisure activities should not be considered while calculating the national income. I repeat the same thing. Leisure activities are those activities which is being rendered without the motive of earning money. Number one. Second is it is impossible to find out the valuation of the leisure activities. Because of these two reasons, we never valued the leisure activities while calculating national income. Let us see the things which comes under the leisure activities. The first one is services of a housewife. When I say services of a housewife, what it means, we know that the housewife are the housemaker and they are managing the house. While managing the house, they are not getting any money. Clear? Second is parents are teaching their own children. While teaching their own children, the parents are not getting any money, but they are giving their services. So it is impossible to value their services and they are teaching their children not to earn any monetary benefit. Third is, so we have seen the services of a housewife, we have seen the parents teaching, and the activities like growing vegetables in the kitchen garden is also the leisure activities. Why? Because we are growing vegetables so that we get the fresh vegetables. Clear? We are not growing it so that we can sell it in the market to fetch the money. So because of this reason, activities like growing vegetables in one's own garden is a leisure activity, will not be considered in the national income. Next is voluntary service done for a community. Most of the time we are giving our services voluntarily. Has the community asked to give the services? Answer is no. We are giving that services voluntarily of our own. So the motive is not to earn money, so it should not be considered while calculating the national income. The third type of the activities which should not be considered is income from illegal activities. Always remember, we only consider the legal activities while calculating the national income. We never consider the income fetched from the illegal activities like theft, gambling, smuggling, black marketing, etc. Whatever the money we earn because of unlawful activities will never ever be considered while calculating national income. Because under the national income, we only consider the income which comes from the legal platforms. Next is windfall gain. Windfall gains such as lotteries, it is excluded from the national income. While it is excluded from the national income, the reason is we can say it is more or less uh, not a unilateral transaction. We have not earned it. Next is income from the sale of second-hand goods. That is a very important point. When I say income from the sale of second-hand goods or the financial asset, it will not be considered while calculating the national income. Why? Because the goods which we are selling right now is already being considered at the time of purchasing. Fine. So we will not consider it again. If we consider it again, it will be the double counting. So the sale of second hand goods should not be considered. While because when we have purchased it, it is already being considered in the national income. Next is tax duties paid to the government Always remember, tax duties paid of the post savings wealth will not be considered. Why? Because it is nothing but a transfer payment. When you are paying the tax, you really feel that the government is liable to render any service to you? Answer is no. We are paying the tax in consideration of the money which we are paying to the government. The government is not giving any services to us. So it is nothing but more or less a transfer activities, transfer payment. So it should not be considered while calculating the national income. Next is capital gain, the money that we get by the sale of the land or the property, or the money that we get because of increase in the price of the stock should not be considered. Why? Because it is nothing but the rise in the value of the land which we have already purchased. If we consider it again, it will be nothing but it will result in the double counting. Next is income from the financial transactions. When I say income from the financial transaction, it means sale and purchase of shares, bonds, debentures, etc. It will not be considered. Why? Because the financial transaction will not result in the creation of the product. When we are going on the financial transactions, when we are purchasing the shares, when we are purchasing the bonds, you really feel that with this, the production will go on in the country. It will not result in any of the production. So the financial transaction will never ever be considered. Clear? Now let us discuss the item that should be considered while calculating the national income. The first is wages earned by the residential employees. As I told you, wages earned by the residential employees should be considered. Why should be considered? Because it is a factor payment, and we always consider the factor payment. It comes under the income method, that is compensation of the employees. Second is profit earned by a resident or the organization located outside the domestic territory. It is the profit by a residential institution should be considered. Clear? It comes under the operating surplus. Next is services that are provided free of cost by the government. Always remember, we never consider the money given by the government to the people, but we always consider the services provided by the government to the people free of cost. Why? Because it will be considered under the final consumption expenditure of the government. If the government is giving the food items, if the government is providing street lighting facilities, it means that the government is incurring the final consumption expenditure. So it should be considered. The next is commission, brokerage paid on the sale and purchase of second-hand goods. Always remember, as I told you, the sale and the purchase of financial assets or the goods and services should not be considered, but the commission or the brokerage paid on the sale and purchase should always be considered. Why? Because it will be the factor services on behalf of the broker, and we always consider the factor services because factor services are earned income. I hope the point is clear. Next is defense and security services provided by the government. It is the final consumption expenditure, so should also be considered. Next is salaries paid to the non-resident working in the domestic territory. When I say salaries paid to the non-resident working in the domestic territory, it means it should be considered. It comes under the compensation of employees. Next is imputed value of the output meant for self-consumption, imputed value of the rent of the owner's occupied house, or the value of the part of the total product which the producer are keeping for self-consumption should always be considered. Imputed value will always be considered at the time of valuing the national income. The next is employer's contribution to the social security. It comes under the compensation of the employees. It is the money which the people is getting for the factor services, so should be considered. Now let us see how much we have learned. These are the questions which is being asked in the board. So let us see. The first is construction of a new house. Always remember, the construction of the new house should be considered while calculating the national income. Why it should be considered? Because it is the capital formation. It is what? It is the capital formation or the investment on the ground of household. So the investment made by the household should be considered at the time of calculating national income. So it is what? It comes under the gross domestic fixed capital formation. Second one is winning of a lottery prize or the crossword or the contents or the windfall gain. The answer is it should not be considered. The question is why it should not be considered? Because it is the transfer payment. It is nothing but transfer payment. It is unearned. Let us see the next one. Increase in the price of the stock lying with the trader. We have already seen it should not be considered. Why it should not be considered? Because it will not result in the production. If the value of the stock will increase, it means that the capital gain should not be considered in the national income when the price of the stock is increasing. What it means? It means it is the capital gain. And always remember, capital gain will not be considered in the valuation of the national income because it will not result in the flow of goods. It will not result in the production of the goods. Next is national debt interest. Always remember, interest on the public debt or the national interest will not be considered. Why? Because the interest made by the government on the consumption activities, on the consumption of goods, will not be considered because it is nothing but the interest paid on the loan which is taken by the government for consumption purposes. Any loan taken by the government for the consumption purposes, the interest paid on that loan should not be considered at the time of calculating national income. Next is rent-free house given to an employee by the employer. It should be considered. Why? Because it is the perquisites. It comes under the compensation of the employees. It is nothing but the perquisites or the perks. Next is profit earned by a branch of a foreign bank in India. Always remember, profit earned by the branches of a foreign bank in India will not be considered. Why? Because if it is the Indian company or if the Indian company is earning the profit in abroad, it should be considered. It should not be considered in the national income. Why should not be considered? Because it is the factor income paid to abroad. Clear? Next is purchase of by a foreign tourist. Purchase by a foreign tourist should be considered, or we can say it is the final sale proceeds. Rent received by the Indian resident on the building rented on abroad, definitely it should be considered. Why should be considered? Because it is the factor income from abroad. Factor income to abroad should not be considered. Factor income from abroad should be considered. Next is payment of fees by a lawyer engaged by a firm. Always remember, the payment of the fees to a lawyer engaged in the firm should not be considered. Why? Because it is a transaction activities. Next is insurance received from Oriental Bank should not be considered. Why? Because it is a transfer receipt. Next is payment on interest by bank to its depositor. It should be considered. Why? Because it is a factor payment. Next is interest received on loan given to a friend for a purchase of car. It should not be considered. Why? Because it is not for the production purposes. It is for consumption purposes. फिर से बोल रहा हूं, interest paid on the loan taken by an individual to buy a motorcycle. By purchasing the motorcycle, the production will be carried out. Answer is no. So this is the loan taken for consumption purposes, and the interest on the loan taken for consumption purposes should not be considered in national income. If it is for production, should be considered, but if it is for consumption, should not be considered. Next is interest received on a loan to a foreign company in India, definitely because for the production. Interest received on a loan given to a foreign company in India. Foreign company is paying the interest because it is a income. It is a factor income from abroad. Let us see some more. Interest received on the debenture. Yes, it will be included in the national income because it is being taken for the production purposes that we have already discussed. Next is expenditure on the construction of a house. It should be considered. Why? Because it is a final consumption expenditure made by the household. Next is scholarship to the Indian students studying should not be considered. Why? Because it is a transfer payment, and we never consider the transfer payment because transfer payment is unearned income. Next is value of bonus share should not be considered because bonus share is that share which is being given to the shareholders without consideration. So it is a transfer payment only. Next is purchase of uniform of nurses in the hospital. It should not be included in the national income. Why? Because it is a intermediate cost of the hospital. It is what? It is the intermediate cost of the hospital. So it should not be considered. Expenditure on the maintenance of a firm. It should not be considered. The answer is the same because it is the intermediate consumption. We never considered the intermediate consumption expenditure. I hope the point is clear. Dear viewers, that's all I have in this video. Dear viewers, if you like the video, don't forget to subscribe the channel. If you like the video, please spread the video as much as you can so that more and more students should join the class. If you like the video and want to join me one-to-one, you can fill the Google form. That form you will find in the description. During this pandemic time periods, it's an appeal, stay home, stay safe, and above all, don't forget to wear mask. Om Shanti.